Welcome to the MassBay Youth Lacrosse League Coaching Education Program. My name is Joey Picard. I am the VP of League Operations for MassBay Youth Lacrosse League. I'm first and foremost an MBYLL coach and town director, and have been an MBYLL coach and advocate for over 10 years. So I want to start by thanking you for being a volunteer coach in your town for this upcoming season. Almost all that we do and focus on at MassBay Youth Lacrosse League revolves around the athlete, the player experience, if you will. Their lacrosse education, their safety, the fun factor, making this enjoyable. The athlete experience certainly consumes us, but also important, also critical to our mission of growing the game of lacrosse in Massachusetts is the coach and the coach's experience. It should most certainly be a positive one, albeit a lot of work. We value coach education and the requirements we put on volunteers to become coaches as a key factor to the success of every town youth program. We will always continue to try and enhance our education process while keeping in balance the time commitment to be a youth coach and value to having better coaches on the field with our kids. The purpose of the MBYLL Coach Education Program provide knowledge and support to allow more volunteers to coach youth lacrosse, to understand the basics of lacrosse, how to create plans for each practice and game, and to understand which skills to teach at your team's grade level throughout this season. What is the MBYLL Coach Education Program? For all coaches new to MBYLL, it's a progression starting with these short series of videos that you are watching. Our videos are meant to give you a baseline of information about coaching youth sports, the sport of lacrosse, and coaching lacrosse practices. Following completion of the video, you can sign up to attend an in-person clinic. The clinic will provide you with details on MBYLL rules and game operations. The instructors will provide specifics on skills and drills appropriate for the age level you're coaching. They will show you how to set up practice plans for the season that will keep the kids engaged and learning the right skills at the right time throughout the season. We will also help you prepare for coaching games and provide you with a handbook with practice plans, skills, and drills to guide you through the season. At the end of the clinic, you will receive the holy grail of MBYLL coaching, the Certified Coach's Badge. You will wear this at every game so players, parents, and the referees, along with the opposing coaches, know each team has a certified head coach. During the season, you will also have an opportunity to communicate with MBYLL coaching leaders with questions and areas of help needed as you put these practice plans and drills into place with your team. We want to be a resource for you throughout the season. You will also have access to our growing library of videos of drills and skills to reference during the season. What is the goal of the MBYLL Coach Education Program? Every coach's goal for a successful season should be having all of their players signing up to play the following year. Our goal with coaching education is similar. We hope that the experience is a positive one where you feel the kids enjoyed themselves, learned skills, and grew as lacrosse players. And with that, our goal is to have every coach want to come back and coach again next season. On behalf of the Board of Directors of MassBay Youth Lacrosse League and the thousands of youth players you will be coaching this spring, thank you and enjoy these videos. In this segment, we're going to discuss coaching youth sports with our panel of MBYLL coaches. And I'm pleased to be joined by Coach Chris Gugino of the North Shore, Coach Christian Kyriakos, formerly of Tribal Youth Lacrosse, and Coach Ed McCarthy of the Metro West region. I'd like to start by putting you right on the spot and asking you, what does good coaching look like to you?
I'll start. Yeah, so good coaching to me really looks like from the top down being a positive role model, and with that, it's all about having a positive environment for the kids. And it's kids who are having fun, who are learning the game, becoming better players.
Coach K, same question.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's the role modeling piece is probably one of the most important that we have to offer these kids. And as we know, athletics are a model for life, and to build not only strong players, but strong youth in general.
Having coached for 30 years, 3 sports, it's really a social model. So when we go to a practice or a game and we see a coach, that coach is a competitive, caring teacher. And that impacts both teams and the kids and the parents. So it's building off what you guys said, that helped me capture that.
So getting into a little bit more specific, as we're having coaches perhaps coaching for the first time in our league, what's been your general approach to teaching kids and how to keep them engaged? And Coach McCarthy, I'd like to start with that question for you.
Sure, I'll tell you, it's, especially with boys, it's structures and systems within a social dynamic, because they have a lot of energy. And, John Wooden used to say, plan your work your plan, and but keep it simple. keep a simple plan and an order of things to do that in, but structures, systems, and routines. That's so helpful.
Coach K, what's your take on putting together a great practice plan?
Well, I think going back to that structure piece, it has to be orderly, it has to be set with specific times, and you almost hide the structure with kind of fun and build planning with games and keep the kids engaged in that respect. And you can kind of hide the what kids would consider physically challenging or demanding with kind of some of the fun exercises that you can go through to get to those end games.
Coach Cugino, what are some of the ways in which we can engage kids at different levels, like the younger kids potentially as opposed to the older levels?
Absolutely. I mean, as a coach, I think it really starts first and foremost with the energy that you bring, right? So if we're bringing the right energy every practice, I mean, we're privileged to coach. I mean, we know that, and that's why we do what we do. So I think first and foremost, it starts with our energy, and they're going to be a reflection of that. But again, varying levels require varying degrees of energy and things you need to bring to them. So, you know, at younger levels, right, it is about gamifying it, right, making it a, you know, a competitive in just literally how many passes you can complete in a row. And as we get to the higher levels, it's about kind of rewarding more structured drills with, you know, more fun, building drills that are more offense, defense, more transition kind of drills. So as you change in age, first of all, it's about keeping the energy up and having fun, but you can scale that up based upon the age group you're working in.
So as we're discussing coaching a team sport, it's really important that we're coaching individuals. And so let's talk a little bit about the fundamentals and how we approach teaching a skill to a youth player. So Chris Cugino.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. At the end of the day, lacrosse is a sport that requires consistency, right? And I think breeding consistency in your practices is one of those things that can set the team on a great trajectory, right? We all know the beginning of the season is always a little bit of an opportunity to learn, right? So I think breeding consistency and, you know, what kind of stick drills you're doing, right? What kind of stick work you're doing, and depending on the level, right, that's going to look different, but making that as game realistic as possible. But again, structure in terms of stick work, fundamentals is critical, and never losing that, right, as you go through the season is something that I'm really focused on. And people are going to come into your program at this level and at this level. So how do you coach both of them? They both need fundamentals, so you always coach it.
And I'd say on top of that, we have to keep it positive. So we like to have about 5 corrections, I'm sorry, 5 positive things to say, and then 1 correction.
Yes.
So we say, you know, great hustle, Joe, great job on getting there and getting near a spot, and on. And then we say, next time what I'd like you to try is this piece.
Sure.
And then if we can keep that kind of momentum going with these kids, they're happy, we're happy, and we get the proper response.
Absolutely. Coach McCarthy, we're teaching a fundamental for the first time.
I'll tell you.
How do we approach it?
I'll tell you, Coach, guys, you know, I mean, in football, it's blocking and tackling, and in wrestling, there's certain moves that we do that they're not that complex. Lacrosse, we have 2 hands, and they're moving, you know, simultaneously. That's a very complex skill, especially for a newcomer. So, you know, we always start, I always tell kids, what does practice make? They say perfect. I say, no, practice makes permanence. And I tell their parents that we want to, when I teach skills, we're in a classroom. I call it the classroom setting. So it's quiet. You have teachers' aides there, and we are really working on proper technique and slow it down. And we pretend that we're on camera. You know, we want these boys to have pride in that. And even if it's, you know, Coach Chris is throwing the ball to me and I'm just learning how to hold the stick, we don't want to rush that. And we do want to come back and say, no, this will take time. Get, you know, comfortable with discomfort, and this is a process. But I just think fundamentals are at the core of what we do. And that's why it was great. When I first started coaching this sport, new to coaching it, I would just, I played a lot of baseball. I'd be just tossing the ball to kids and learning on my own, learning how to teach it. So practice makes permanence.
No, and I think to build off of that too, right? Varying levels, it's about engagement, right? So we've got a group of anywhere from 15, 20 kids in a practice, right? And at the end of the day, it's about high repetition fundamentals. In the game that we play, that is very stick skill driven, lacrosse IQ, sport specifically driven. The more that we can up the repetitions, I mean, the higher value every one of our athletes is going to get out of it. Every one of these kids is going to get out of it. So, it's about having a plan, knowing what we're going to do in those drills, and as a coach, being able to pivot, but understand. Is this a drill that we are getting the right amount of repetition? And that's at all levels, right? So at all levels, if the more you touch the ball, the more everyone touches the ball, the more engaged. Again, U9, the attention span's a little bit shorter than our U15 teams. So about understanding that, honoring that, and bringing the right drills, fundamentals, right? Everything that we know a good coach is going to bring.
And I think too, I'm sorry, but I think too we can all agree that we've put together a practice plan and we've tried to execute it, and the drill that we used for that particular skill set just didn't work, and the personnel just didn't get it for whatever reason. And we have to go back to the planning room and kind of have drills in our pocket that we can interject to try to make it get the kids back on track. Absolutely. And that does happen.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. Yes, skills are really important to teach, but how much do we have to focus as coaches on their emotional well-being, on their ego, on their attitude, and their approach to the game? How can we as coaches and role models affect that? Coach McCarthy, let's keep going.
Well, I've been in a classroom for a long time, and I think that, I always try to, I think you said it earlier, Coach, I'm trying to model a character that I want the kid to be. So if I praise, if I say, hey, that mistake's okay, hey, let me help you, then I'm trying to encourage them to help one another. But I always do a character theme of the week, or we'll say, hey, this is what we're looking for today. What does a good practice look like today? Good practice looks like, I want to hear, hey, can I help? Or what have you. So we have to have scripts for that. That's part of our practice plan. Coaches and I will get together on the phone and say, what do we want to do tomorrow? I got a great idea. Let's say help a buddy out tomorrow, what have you. So before practice, you're taking your buddy's equipment over or what have you. But that's part of our plan. Our part of the end of the day, at the end of the season, we're going to get together with all these kids, and they're going to be connected in some way. There'll be some, there'll be respect for each person. So we got to work on that. It's part of the plan, I think.
I mean, a coach is a facilitator, right? And at the end of the day, it's a huge privilege to be a coach in any level, youth, high school, professional, college, right? Doesn't even matter. It is a privilege and an honor. So, I think about it holistically. I mean, first and foremost, it's like we've got to own ourselves, energy we bring, right? Energy we bring to practice. We own that. But outside of that, it's about individual relationships with each one of the, the young athletes, these kids that we're coaching. Because the more that we know them individually, the more that we can recognize and understand what works best for them, right? What works best for them to elevate them to the best level, the highest level, right? We have kids who, can be elevated, right? And being able to bring those kids back down, and kids who go get down on themselves, being able to bring them up. And then at the end of the day, how do you balance that from a team perspective? Not just in practice, but I think the more challenging thing that'll happen, especially being in sports for a long time, being competitive, is now what's our demeanor in a game, right? Because that is what a team feeds off of. So, really at the end of the day, the end result of a season, if you have a team that's come together, kids who enjoy spending time together, it doesn't matter about wins and losses. Right. It's really all about, how much the team came together.
So coaches, let me ask this. What's the difference in coaching and teaching 7 to 10-year-olds, so we're talking our level 1, 2s, compared to 11 through 14-year-olds, some of our older levels?
These kids don't know how to move yet. They don't know how to
read.
shuffle.
Some of them don't know how to read in school.
Exactly. Right? So we really do have to approach it in a way where we assume nothing, and we take them as individuals, and we do our best to kind of mentor them. And just on the idea of mentoring too, one of the things that I've been successful, or we've been successful at doing, is to take some of our older players and use them as mentors for the younger players, because those younger players really look up to those kids, and they learn very well from them.
I think it's a great question. I think it's a very important question. I think that one of the greatest opportunities for Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse is that 7 to 10-year-old age bracket. You know who the best teachers are, 7 to 10? Parents. They know that kids are struggling with organization. They struggle with transitions. They need focus times to take a break. I find from my learning and coaching around the country, a lot of the older coaches really struggle with that. And again, going back to your point, I remember saying to a dad last year, this boy, he's learning how to read at school. He's having trouble. Really, he's trying to organize his desk. He's trying to. So at that level, I think it's so important to get parents on board. Show parents, hey, we're going to do today. We're just going to do partner passing and simple things to keep them focused. But when in doubt, we all know, get those little guys moving.
Oh yeah.
Get those little guys moving into games and keep them active, because their focus on individual skills is not really developmentally there yet. But then moving up, of course, we're in a different place. 11 to 14, Piaget would say the different developmental skills are coming in. Their focus is really in tune. I mean, you can teach, even in 4 or 5 practices, you can teach a boy to go over the shoulder almost perfectly. So we are talking apples and oranges, though. I mean, and that's why we need more parents. 7 to 10, those first years, come in and understand the organizational piece and timeouts and focus.
Of course it does, and that can help as you're practice planning and then executing that plan, because you had mentioned earlier you have a team of 15 to 20 kids, but some towns, they have their whole level. You're talking about 60 kids practicing on one field at one time.
Right.
Organizing that, getting the most out of that, making sure all 60 of those kids are having a positive experience. That's hard to do.
Very hard.
Yeah, I mean, 60 kids is, you're right, totally not uncommon at the youth level. But it's first of all, it's awesome, right?
It is.
And when you have a group of coaches, you're able to pre-plan, right? I think that's always the big thing. And again, high rep fundamentals and high energy drills that are mimicking in-game situations from like a one voice perspective, right? It's in many situations where we've had 60 kids, we've basically developed stations. Each coach is going to have their time with their team, which is wonderful, whether you do that at the beginning, the end, or kind of bookend it in practice. But then, the thing that I love is, and now you're giving these kids opportunities with different coaches who may teach something different or similar to you. So it's either reiterating or it's a different voice. Sometimes things click differently. Definitely happens for me. But again, rotating them through keeps it fresh and gives the coaches an opportunity to see everyone as well. So. While 60 kids can be a challenge, it's a huge opportunity. Again, plan that internally amongst the coaches in the town, which we've all done, and really execute at a high level once you're in those practices.
So I just say that's a great point. I mean, I'm a dad. Okay, what do I want for my sons? I want my son at the end of the season to say, I met 10 coaches. And they're all different, and I learned something from each of them. Now that's so important for a youngster, is to have those experiences with different adults. It's a great point, Coach.
And 60 kids does sound overwhelming, I get it. But when you break it into 3 groups of 20, it's very manageable, and you can make those relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
So coaches, we're going to be talking and have talked a lot about the player needs and what we have to provide them, but let me ask this question to you. What do you need as a coach? What are you looking for to make this experience valuable and worthwhile for you?
Sure. So I'm up to about 75 seasons coaching football wrestling, and my goal is 100. And I'll tell you, I look back on those 75 seasons, and we connect with kids, right? We do, and we figured out we connect with our co-coaches. We need parents. I mean, the best seasons I've had were when I had relationships with the parents that were, conversational, or they were involved in the practice. And I think there's a lot of problems in youth sports now because the parents feel like they can't be involved. So I want to get as many parents involved in my, let's say, U10 team. I'm gonna have a meeting at the beginning of the season, and I know a lot of my friends say I don't like to email the coaches, because that's kind of a tricky thing for me. I say, oh yeah, just meet with them and just try to recruit them. And for simple things, though, I like to have two or three parents per each practice who can just volunteer to be at practice. Can you be there just to help with the balls, etc. And again, going back to disguised, we disguise with the kids. That's just a disguised way for me to develop a relationship with them. We might have a kid who's having a tough day, I'm slowly, pulling them into the fold. And most of the time they say, well, this is, as you said, Coach, this is an honor, this is a privilege, this is a great, but then that can ramp up. Because what adults do, they do what the kids do. Wow, this is kind of cool. I might learn to do this, and I'm going to listen to Coach. And then after a time, right, like any other enterprise, we can step back. Another John Wooden thing, right? I can gradual release of responsibility. And you know, I can say to a couple parents, hey, why don't you take a goalie down, and I could teach you to. And then, I mean, then we're building a community. You know, so that's what I need, and that's one of my main goals as a coach.
And would you say that these parents have to have a background in lacrosse?
Not at all. They're parents.
Right.
They're parenting skills.
I think that's what scares them, right?
Yes, it does.
So.
You know, and from a coaching standpoint as well, I mean, having played collegiately, you know, been playing the sport for over 20 years now, you know, love coaching the game. And, you know, for me, what's worked exceptionally well is, you know, when you're coaching a team, is having, you know, assistant coaches. You know, I think, you know, in the levels that we've coached on, be it select, be it, you know, the classic level, having, you know, 2 other assistant coaches, it really just breeds a better result for the kids in general. So, you know, whether it is parents who have learned the game, but at the end of the day, it's a parent who's curious about the game, one who wants to learn about the game. And those assistant coaches, you know, again, varying degrees, some may know lacrosse, some may not, right? But the best part about it is being curious about, hey, how do I learn this drill? How do I learn more about the game? And when you build that rapport with your assistant coaches, that again is going to breed a way better result in the field and for the team. And the other thing, you know, in terms of, you know, focusing on the coaching, because that's what we do and that's what we're trying to do, create the best experience for the team, is having a team manager. You know, not to say that you know, I don't, you know, like communicating about when to be where and how to get there and the directions, but just take something off your plate, right? And it brings, you know, another lever for a parent to be involved, right? And to develop that community around lacrosse, like you're talking about, Ed.
Sure.
You know, where you're getting someone involved that takes something off your plate, where you're focusing on coaching and developing your assistant coaches. So those are the things I've found have been extremely successful in, you know, making my job as a coach and developing my, you know, my assistants really successful.
And I think having a framework that supports you as a coach is very important. And we're very fortunate to have that with MBYLL, Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse Organization. They hit the bullet points for us. They give us a lot of enrichment opportunities for study, to grow as coaches, wonderful clinics that we've all partaken in, and you know, really do feel the support from them. So that's been extremely helpful for our organization.
For sure.
Absolutely.
In this video, we are going to cover the basics of youth lacrosse. Here's how the game is played at level 1-2 and level 3-4. Level 1-2 games are played 7v7, and level 3-4 games are played 8v8. Teams are expected to play with 2 attack, 2 midfielders, 2 defenders, and a goalie, and at level 3-4, they add a 3rd midfielder. Long poles are not permitted at levels 1-2 or 3-4. Levels 1-2 and 3-4 games are played on a smaller, modified field. Levels 5-6 and 7-8 are played in a full-sized regulation field. Level 1-2 in MBYLL uses smaller goals, 4 feet by 4 feet.
What's up, coaches? My name is MBYLL, and I've played the sport of lacrosse for 22 years at the youth, high school, collegiate, and now professional level. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the offensive principles in the sport of lacrosse. All right, coaches, very, very important for our players to have a functioning stick, Also very important for you to have one as well. We need to set a good example for our players, and we need to have a stick that is able to operate on the lacrosse field, right? Solid head with nice mesh, along with a great put together shaft is what we're looking for. Again, let's set a good example for our players by having a good stick ourselves. Continuing on with our gear, let's talk about our lacrosse helmet. Very, very important that each one of our players has a properly fitting, properly put on lacrosse helmet to wear to each and every practice and game. Along with that, staying in our head area, it is essential that each player have a mouth guard as well. This mouth guard is recommended to be attached to the face mask of our helmet so it is not easily lost. Two very important pieces of equipment there. Next up are our shoulder pads. Very important that each one of our players has a properly fitting pair of shoulder pads. All right, common times throughout games or practices, you can see those attachments come undone. It is very important that the player stops and reattaches those attachments for his safety. In addition to our shoulder pads, we have our arm pads. All right, lacrosse is a physical game where contact and checking is allowed. Many times the checking will occur on your arm. It's essential for us to have a pair of well-fitting arm guards that are not moving up and down our players' arms but are staying put in order to protect. Moving down from there are our gloves. It is essential that we have a pair of lacrosse-specific gloves. The reason being, it is essential for our mobility and effectiveness as well as our protection. As we've mentioned, many of our checks occur in our hands, so good fitting, properly put on pair of gloves is essential as well. Coaches, it is extremely essential that each one of our players is wearing a protective cup to each and every practice and game. That is a piece of equipment that should be worn and is worn at every different level of lacrosse, including at the professional level. Moving down, all right, our footwear. It is very important prior to our practice or game to be aware of the surface that you and your team are going to be on. Whether it is artificial turf or grass, make sure we are wearing cleats or the proper footwear depending on the surface that we are playing on. All right, coaches, we're going to talk about passing and catching. Believe me, we're going to be excited to get out to our first practice, and there's a lot of things that we want to accomplish, but it's important that we build good habits and start with our fundamentals, and nothing is more important than our passing and catching. We're going to hit on passing first, all right? We're going to work here from the ground up. We're going to hit on a couple key principles here that we can remind our players as we work throughout the season. It is essential, all right, as a right-handed player now, that I get my left foot in front of my right foot and bend my knees so I'm in an athletic position. So once I have my feet set, we're going to work my way up, all right, and I'm going to have my shoulders and hips turned, all right, to angle my pass better, okay? Once I have my body set from my feet up to my chest, all right, it now becomes about my hands and my arms, all right? It is essential for our young players to get a separation from our body and our stick, all right? You'll see a lot of times we come in with short arms. We call that alligator arms or dinosaur arms. What we want to do is press away from our body and rotate, all right? So we are passing with our stick in this area, AKA known as the box, okay? We want to make sure that we are stressing, playing fundamental and passing from the box each and every time. Last concept we want to go over is the push-pull aspect of our hands, okay? As we look at my bottom hand here, which is my left hand, that is going to be my pull hand, and my top hand, my right hand, all right, as we place on the stick here, down the middle of the shaft, is going to be my push hand, okay? My push-pull squeeze from my ear is going to be the most consistent way that I'm going to learn how to pass effectively. Once I set everything out through my body correctly, then I'm able to just set my hands on my shaft correctly and push, pull, squeeze into successful passing. When we're talking about passing, it's important to understand where we want our hand placement to be. All right, so when I'm looking at my shaft, what I like to tell young players, all right, is to move our hand halfway down the shaft to find a place that's comfortable. All right, our top hand is going to be our right hand as a right-handed player for this example. So I'm going to move my hand down halfway. And as a coach here, we want to build some consistency for our players throughout the season. So a great idea is to use a piece of tape to mark that area so we're as consistent as possible when we're throwing our passes. It's important here, especially as a young player, to understand the value of keeping the stick loose in our hands and almost into our fingers here as we learn how to pass effectively. That allows our wrist to hinge at a better level. It also allows us to remain more comfortable and consistent with our hand placement as we're throwing our passes. We're going to talk talk about catching the ball here, which can be a little bit trickier for younger players than learning how to pass. All right, catching, a couple things that we can do to help ourselves. First and foremost, before we even receive the ball and the ball's even in the air, we can teach our players to show a good target, right? Show a target, demand the ball, open our mouths and talk. And again, you'll notice our theme of everything up by our ear that we call the box. We want to show a target right to the box as well. Common thing we're going to see is our young players trying to snap or grab at that ball that's in the air. We want to promote the idea and build the good habits of soft hands and catching this ball behind our ear each and every time. So again, it's going to take getting used to and repetition, but once we show a target, we are receiving that pass with soft hands and behind our ear, so we are able to now control the ball and make the next play. Let's talk about our hand placement when we're receiving a pass and teaching our players how to catch a lacrosse ball. As we talked about when we're throwing the ball, we talked about moving that hand down to the middle so we could push and pull. We're going to move this hand back to the top, so now we have more control over the throat of the stick. This is going to allow us to control our head a little bit more, especially if the pass is outside of the box and we have to move our stick accordingly. This way, I'm able to track the ball and receive that pass behind my ear. We do not want to have our players gripping this pole super tight. All right, that makes it much more difficult to adjust to a pass. It also makes it much more difficult to move our hand back down to make the next play. So we want to continue with that theme of loose hands and feeling the stick in our fingers. That way I'm able to receive this pass and be in a passing position then to go make that next play. Talking about shooting, essential that we first and foremost get our good principles and our good fundamentals mastered right before we move on to what's next. So, assuming that we do, start nicely from our feet, rotate our core, turn our shoulders, and we are in good position. We want to push our leg all the way through, almost like a pitcher in baseball, okay? That way I know my weight is completely shifting all the way forward and getting all my power into my shot, and I'm not holding back. All right, an example of not getting all my weight through is this. All right, you notice I'm not coming all the way through. We want to make sure our players are stepping forward off of their back foot and rotating all the way around like a pitcher in baseball would each and every time we take a shot. All right, coaches, as we get into our shooting drills, all right, we're going to see a lot of different things that we're going to want to take away from habits from our players. All right, a couple things, again, starting from the ground up. Are our feet. We talked about how important our feet were and how essential it is to get in the correct position with our back leg pushing off and our front leg stepping strong. All right, one thing we'll see from a lot of young players is either stepping too far to the outside, all right, which is going to pull our shot to my left, or stepping across our bodies, which is essentially blocking our momentum and prohibiting us from getting all the way through. Remember, we talk about getting our weight all the way through our shots. If we step across our bodies, we're not able to do that. A great tip or a great thing to tell our players is to try to split the goalie in half and step right at their 5-hole or in between their legs to know that we're getting as accurately as we can towards that cage. All right, coaches, as the season is going on and we're doing a great job spending a lot of practice time on building our skills and fundamentals, all right, we're going to get a chance to play in some scrimmages and game-like scenarios, so we want to make sure that we're teaching our kids outstanding team offense. Each kid's going to be listening, learning, and having a great time in a fun environment. As we're getting into our offensive possessions, it is important that we give our players both positions to get to and how to get there. By establishing our positions and getting to the correct spaces, we are best setting ourselves up for success on offense. Next, and a great way to get everybody involved and everybody communicating and working together is to get the ball around as something we call touches. Touches is moving the ball in a circle, making sure that each player gets a touch and allows them to feel a part and involved in the group. Now let's talk about some things we can do to be successful offensively. First and foremost, all of the players on the field, each and every one of them, we want to be engaged and in the play. All right, this means we want to be in an athletic, triple threat position, as we call it, ready to make a play. Our sticks are up in the box that we have talked about before, ready to either receive a pass, and my knees are bent, and I'm ready to move my feet if necessary. Okay, so now each player is involved and ready to be a part of the offense. The one player with the ball, right, has a decision now. We want to dodge hard towards the goal to make that defense move. Once that has happened, that player with the ball is either going to take a shot or move the ball along to their same team offensive player. All right, great thing to emphasize in our offensive sets is ball movement. It is great to see multiple passes in an offensive set. The ways to do that is by keeping the ball moving, but also to keep each player that does not have the ball moving, engaged with their stick up, ready to make a play at all times. So coaches, we want to have an offense that promotes ball movement, that promotes player movement. We want to have our players with their sticks up, always ready to make a pass, make a catch, take a shot. And the reason for this is because it puts a lot of pressure on the defense. It is difficult for a defense to defend when all players are moving and every player is engaged and the threat of making a play. And the way that we really cultivate this is we do drills in practice that are going to promote these principles. So we do drills with a lot of ball movement, with a lot of player movement, with a lot of players with their sticks up, being ready to make a play. This is going to overall just promote everyone staying engaged and being able to enjoy this great sport of lacrosse.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Chase with RPM Athlete Performance. I'm here today to talk to you about playing defense in the game of lacrosse. Let's talk about equipment, and perhaps the most important piece of equipment that protects your head, your helmet. You want to make sure your kids are properly outfitted and that they're wearing them at all times when they're on a lacrosse field. Your shoulder pads, you need good sternal protection. It's got to cover your clavicles, and you need shoulder caps, something that fits well, but it's not so restrictive you can't move, and put your arms straight above your head. Next, your arm guards, your elbow pads. You want to make sure that you have good protection there, good padding. Again, it needs to allow good range of motion, but ultimately be protective from slashes and other types of contact. Then of course you have your gloves. You need good wrist mobility in your gloves, but you also need good wrist protection. Trying out a bunch of pairs of gloves and making sure that you have a good feel is really important. Then you need a cup. All players need an athletic cup to play the game of lacrosse. Very important piece of equipment, often overlooked. All of your guys need to be suited up. Lastly, make sure that your kids are outfitted with the right footwear. They need good traction when they're on a lacrosse field. So make sure they're not going out there in basketball shoes on a natural grass field. That's a recipe for disaster. So good high quality cleats with good bite so they have traction and can change direction quickly. Now let's talk about the most exciting piece of equipment, and that is your lacrosse stick. You need one of these on the field at all times to play the game of lacrosse. Now, traditionally you'll see defensemen using a long pole. This is not going to be introduced until 5th grade at the youth level. So all of your players are going to have to use a short stick. Offense, defense, midfield, doesn't matter. This is your weapon right here, okay? You want to make sure that this is a consistent throw and catch for you. It's not too big of a pocket where it's too much whip where the ball's going into the ground, right? And you can also catch it and the ball's gonna release. And of course, it's legal by MBYLL rules. Also, very important for you as a coach, you wanna make sure that you have a good consistent stick that throws and catches so that you can demonstrate and be a part of practice and an active member of every drill. Sometimes you have to demo. You don't want to be borrowing your own player's stick and taking them out of the drill. You want to make sure you have your own stick and you are actively engaged and participating. At the start of every practice and game, you want to make sure that your players are properly warmed up. The best way to do that is to use a dynamic stretch, which means the players are active. They're not stationary or static and sitting on the ground. They're actually up and moving around and doing athletic movements to prepare to play. Also really important, get the sticks warm, right? Do some good stick work, really simple drills, just to get the action of catching and passing going. Don't overcomplicate your warm-up. Make it simple, make it fun, make it active. If there's one thing your players need to learn this season, it's good defensive stance. And the reason why we do that is we want to have them in a good low athletic position and balanced when they get in that position. So sitting nice and low, not falling over backwards, not falling over forwards, but in a good position, able to move around the field, and they're gonna have their stick off their hip. Not in here tight, they're gonna put their backhand in their side pocket and their sticks out in front. The reason why we teach this low stance, it's important to have a low center of gravity and to be able to move around the field, not just be stationary. We wanna find drills that are engaging and excite your kids about the game of lacrosse and playing defense. The kids have to be able to move forward and back, side to side. They've got to be able to shuffle, cross over, and then even pick up ground balls out of this position. And so find drills that are really active and still teach them these good fundamental positioning and keep them excited about the game. In the game of lacrosse, you're either playing defense on ball or off ball. And when you're on ball, you want to make sure that when you arrive on your player with the ball, You're teaching your players to get nice and low with their stick off their hip. As they arrive, they want to break down, getting nice and low, having that stick out in front that they can use to disrupt, throw checks, but it also acts as a buffer for them to be able to react and gauge how close they are to their man. As that player approaches downhill, you want to make sure that your players are active on the balls of their feet and that they're reacting to the movement and reading their center and their hips rather than looking at their eyes and their stick. And then once that offensive player initiates movement, you're teaching your players how to drop step either way as they react. And you're teaching your players how to play off-ball defense, right? They need to learn a couple really important things. And one is, how close do they play out on their man? They can't be shut off on their guy the entire game. They've got to be able to get into the interior of the defense and support. So the farther away the ball is, the closer they can get to the interior of the defense. The closer the ball starts to get to their man, they need to start to press out so that by the time he receives the ball, they can step out and play good position one-on-one defense. Another really important concept is keeping your head on a swivel. That is to say, you see the ball and your man, right? So you're constantly looking back and forth between the man with the ball and your own guy. You want to try to avoid situations where the ball is 180 degrees away from your man. And so just build out a little bit of an angle, a little bit of a man-ball triangle, right? Either back up and point your hips that way so you can see the ball in your man and your swivel shorter, or you can turn to the other side. But that man-ball triangle will really help your young players with those difficult situations where they have to keep their head on a swivel. Now that you've got your players playing on-ball and off-ball defense, lots of moving parts, how do you coordinate those moving parts? And the answer is simple, it's communication. Teaching your players proper communication on defense is essential to playing good, solid team defense. And it's important to make that part of your culture. It's difficult to teach, but if you're consistent about it and you make it a repetitive and even kind of make it a fun thing for your players, they're going to engage more with it, and ultimately they're going to be a better lacrosse team for it. Here's a really simple place to start with your communication and starting to integrate team defense. And that's that we always need somebody on the ball, right? I got ball, nice and loud, right? With authority. The kids are going to really engage in that process. You can even have awards for kids who are the loudest talkers or the best communicator on your team defense. And then that man needs a help right and a help left. Just the two defenders that are adjacent, right and left, respectively, can talk nice and loud. And that gets you started towards having a good, loud, communicating team defense. One of the most important skills you're going to be teaching your players is how to use their cross, to throw stick checks. And two of the most simple checks you can teach them right off the bat that are ultimately the most effective and the lowest risk are poke checks and lift checks. You want to make sure that you're also teaching checks on the move. Very rarely you're going to throw a check and not have to move your feet, so make sure that the drills that you construct have them moving their feet in coordination with executing these stick checks. One of the most effective skills that you can teach your players is how to throw a poke check. Getting nice and low in that athletic stance, when you arrive, is a great time to throw it, right? We put our hand in our back pocket. You're showing your players how to step out, approach the ball, slide their bottom hand through like a pull cue, and they're aiming for that bottom hand ultimately, right? Trying to disrupt that bottom hand, neutralize. They might even get a good piece of that stick as it's coming across in a split dodge and dislodge the ball. Very low risk check, very effective. Also teach your players how to throw this check and then move their feet, whether it's throwing a poke and moving laterally or drop stepping, which is also what they want to be doing when that player is initiating that dodge, just throwing that poke and opening up and drop stepping. One of the best checks you can teach your players to be really effective on defense and not compromise their position is a lift check. Right? Getting under their opponent's bottom hand and lifting is extremely effective when you neutralize that bottom hand and force that man to throw one-handed. You may dislodge the ball, you may force a bad pass, maybe a weaker shot that's easier for your goalie to save, and you guys can ultimately gain possession for your team. Also with that lift check, making sure you're not throwing it to the ceiling, that you're decelerating that check, right, and not hitting their man in the face mask. That's really important. And as you mentioned with the poke check, you want to make sure that you're doing the lift check and coordinate it with movement, not standing stationary. Lift checking and drop stepping, lift checking and moving laterally are really important components to executing stick checks. As a coach that's coaching the defense, you're going to be spending a lot of time on defensive skills and stopping the other team's offense. But once you gain possession, you're jump starting your offense, and you've got to teach your players how to transition the ball up the field safely so that you can go to work on the offensive side of the field. Part of teaching defenders how to transition the ball offensively is incorporating drills that allow you to pick the ground ball up off the turf and move it to a more dangerous position on the field and getting their heads up and seeing their teammates. Also, moving and not standing around once you gain possession is really key. So having drills that teach your players to get to specific areas of the field and having that offensive mindset and flipping that switch from defense to offense is crucial. Stick skills for your defenders are essential to transitioning the ball up the field. Make sure that you're working drills into your practice that get progressively farther apart between the two players trying to move the ball up the field, because ultimately they're going to be throwing longer passes than offensive players in order to jumpstart that transition offense. At the younger level, everybody wants to score goals and get rewarded and have all the glory. It's really important as a defensive coach that you're keeping your players engaged and rewarding those little things that ultimately help your team win games. Ground balls, great communication, cause turnovers, these are all reasons to celebrate. So make sure you keep your defenders active and reward them when they do those good things on the field.
In this segment, our MBYLL coaching panel is going to be discussing coaching practices. And that's really one of the most time-consuming and important endeavors that we take. We spend most of our time coaching at practices, even though it's all really about the games on Sundays, isn't it? What areas of focus do we need the parents and players and our town directors and everyone to kind of make aware of how important it is for us? What are those areas?
In general, for a practice, again, I need to plan. I need to have a plan. And the way I do a youth practice is I focus on the feet first to get them moving, and then their hands, and then a drill, and then play. But along the lines of that sequence that I have in my head, which is simple for me, it's 4 things. I want to get them moving. I want to keep them busy. I want to keep an eye on my watch, make sure things are truncated. But there's teaching in there as well. I mean, in the beginning, I want to get them moving. I'm not really teaching. Go through these drills. Boys are, they're moving their bodies in different ways. Coach, you said it earlier. I thought it was a great point about we want to imitate what happens on a field. And I heard Belichick say last year, he came, visited my school, talked to all the football coach. He said this cool thing. Sounds like, oh, wow, why didn't I ever think of that? He said, we don't practice anything we don't see from above in film. So what I try to do just in the beginning is we want the V cuts. We want you to come up and, come up, close, and break down. So we teach their feet first because I think we can do that without a lot of talk. But then we go to the hands, and our skills. And the way I do that is I, we, and then you approach, which takes time. What I mean by that is I will model it, and then I'll model it in different ways. And then we'll do it together. Why don't we do it together in pairs? And that can be by ability or mixed ability. That could be, new with newcomers, novices with experienced guys. And then, hey, you go do it by yourself, and I let them go. Because that's part of learning theory too. Hey, right, go make some errors, and then we move to and I know this is structural here, but then we go to just some basic triangle stuff, how to use your head in the game, how to balance, how to move the field, basic stuff, strong to weak. But then in the end is, I think probably this is where it all comes together, is play. And I script the scrimmages. We're going to do this scrimmage, but I want you to try to do this. The ball will always go around when you run, so it's a little like let them play with only some correction. So I know that's a lot, but going back one more time is feet, get them moving. You're an athlete, son, even without your stick. Work on their hands in a teaching environment. Work on a little of the idea stuff with drills, and then go get them, have fun.
Well, that's it. I think nobody comes to work lacrosse. Everybody comes to play lacrosse. So you make a really good point.
Good point.
And once we do get these kids moving, then it's about repetition, right? And we have to. We like to call it touches.
Yes.
And there are so many drills that you can get bogged down, and the kid might be in a line for 10 minutes before he gets his one touch. So we have to be creative, and there are a lot of different drills, and there's a great resource with the MBYLL website that has tons of drills that coaches can pick from, where these kids are getting these high rep and high touch volume, and it's really that simple. So we don't need some high level former lacrosse player, just somebody who's relatable to the children.
Sure.
And,
Always.
No doubt.
That's what we're trying to.
No doubt.
So when you put together a practice plan, which we all agree is critical, how much input do you take from your assistant coaches? How much input do you take from parents, if any?
I mean, I think as much as possible. I think that's the first thing. It's just as important for a coach or someone who's running a program or even just starting a program, right, to have that community, right, team by committee, right, coaching a team by committee environment because we're hearing these opportunities, right. Lacrosse is applied, the skills we learn in lacrosse, right, are applied across so many other sports. So we have parents who are experts and have coached in those different things, but owning a certain drill, especially if we're new in the game and we're coaching at the youth level, 10 years and under, rather than owning the practice, rather than me soup to nuts running the warm up, our stick skills, running the defense, transition, and offensive drills. I mean, makes it way easier to, Sunday night, whenever works for you, for the coaches when you guys are together, to say, okay, here's what we're looking at. If we're going to have 3 different stations, we'd like to have an offense, a defense, transition station, depending on the numbers we have. But right, being able to say, I want you to seek out this drill and let's talk about it, right? Is this the right drill for the team, right? Breeds ownership and an opportunity to learn the game, and it makes it easier as a coach to run a practice. So everyone has a voice coaching-wise, which I think is the best part about it.
And it's a fluid process too, right? We develop a lot of knowledge from game day. We see what our strengths and weaknesses are, and we might want to practice those throughout the week, the different opportunities.
I would say I've been on a lot of staffs. I was, here's a plug. I coached with my high school coach, Bussy Adam, just stepped down, winningest coach in history. My first 8 years coaching was with him, 8 Eastern Mass finals, 5 state championships. People say, how do you do it? Well, we planned. And we'd have a discussion every day. What's going well? How's Chris doing in school? We would have a talk. And what do we want to do? Well, let's just go with this plan. But even more importantly, what we did after a practice. This didn't work. Why didn't it work? I don't know. The kids weren't having fun. Well, what could we do? Even a chat in the parking lot. But this communication is so important, as we all know in our workplaces too, because you want to empower people. Love what you said, Coach. I could start pushing buttons and send an email out, hey, we're going to do this, this, this. Yeah. But for me to say, hey, to even, let's say you're coaching wrestling with me and you're like, Coach, I don't know what I'm doing, but that seemed a little too intense. Well, that's good feedback. So as a coach, I want to include everybody. I want to learn because, again, they're challenging my biases. But again, feedback too, at least once every 2 weeks. Hey, boys, everybody get over there, take an index card. Say 2 things you love about practice, 2 things that aren't going well or you're struggling with. Take the cards home. Wow, maybe we got it. So it evolves, but again, it's communication and it's respecting every member, every coach, and giving them and empowering them and balancing that.
Absolutely.
So we have a practice plan that we put a lot of time and thought into, and we take some other people as their advice and input. How about a season plan? Do we have something that we come into a year saying we're going to be here week 1, we're going to be here week 5, here at the end, and how often does that change?
Yeah. We actually do have that. Yeah, we have that model, and what's nice about the organization that I was formerly with, Tribal, is we've archived it so that they can be recycled year after year. Obviously, they grow and they get more enhanced, but it gives new coaches a framework. So not only do they have the support of the MBYLL, but they have our infrastructure as a youth organization as well to model after. So those practice plans are all kind of in place. They're able to pull them up offline for new coaches. So it really simplifies the process for our kids.
Well, this question is right up my alley because I'm a teacher and I work with new teachers, and I tell them, they'll come in and say, Ed, how do I get through this quarter? I'll say, they're just trying to survive. They're going practice to practice or day to day. And you'll be like, that's part of it. That's part of the learning process first. But you do want to have a map. We're going to coach, let's say we're going to do, first and second grade level this year. We're going to write down all the practice dates and say, guys, what do you think? Maybe by practice 6, we can get everybody to learn proper catching technique and throwing technique. And maybe by week 10, we can get everybody to understand our little house defense, or we just get some points that we're putting in there. But you know, there's the other stuff. I did a couple of years ago. My son said, "Dad, you got all these plans. Where's all the fun stuff?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, you're right. Night out for ice cream every 2 weeks, you know, or parents, you know, like put in 2 parents' nights, you know, parents at practice night or something." But just that scope and sequence is tremendously important. Then the last thing I'll say, and I that's why I'm here today, is this is a community. I mean, I picked up a stick in Massachusetts 40 years ago, and I can pick up the phone and call fellows who are much older, but I know I could call guys who are 22, very, very knowledgeable, and say, "Hey, I'm kind of struggling with this. This game's kind of changed. Oh, coach, try this." So the resources are there, and I think Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse does a great job of connecting people to help each other.
Absolutely.
So our hope and expectation is a lot of coaches are going to come into their season and say, we're going to use our resources, we're going to plan everything out. By week 6, we're going to be 5-1 or 6-0, and every kid on my staff's going to pass and catch. We're going to be running a triangle offense. We're going to be recognizing the second slide, and then the reality kicks in.
Sure, no doubt.
And how do we keep coaches encouraged? How do we have them remap their season, perhaps? What ways can we kind of, you know, just reconfigure our season and our expectations to make sure it's positive for everybody?
I'll only answer that. I've coached teams that are, you know, I mean, I coached at St. Paul's in Baltimore. Time for the #1 team. That was exciting. I've coached teams that are 0-9. It has to do with what we're measuring. And you said 5-1, 6-1. A few years ago, I coached a youth team. They had a tough year last year, 0-11. And I met with the parents. I said, we're going to count number of passes. Boom. I don't care what happens.
Yep.
First game, these kids couldn't pass. I think they had 60 passes. You should have seen the response, both in terms of their excitement and this belief in a measurable goal. So I'm not saying, I mean, I'm a very competitive person. I'm not saying that scoreboard isn't important. But, you know, parents, when you come to the game, you're going to see the boys stop the other players with their hands. We're going to try to do that 40 times today. And then passing, we're going to overpass. Or we're going to be the first, not necessarily the guy to pick up the ground ball, but the first guy to the ground ball. So if we can give those, they provide hope, they're measurable, but more importantly, the parent on the sideline is saying, wow, my son can't pick up the ball yet. He's to every ball. Or so again, changing the lens, right, of what success is. And then the coaches are like, hey, we're 0-5, but guess what? You know, we just made 50 passes. You know, and I think that has something to do with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
managing expectations is what it's all about. I mean, the second that we forget that it's about something way bigger than us, you know, we're not in the right space. So, you know, I think keeping it about the kids, right, and checking yourself at the door when you walk out to practice, bringing that energy that, you know, is really fundamental about being a coach and why we're doing what we're doing, and for sure, right, it's a game that can be fun when you change that. When you change that lens of what you're focusing on, and again, it comes down to us. And if we're the ones who are driving that, right, we are, you know, the person who's running things on the sideline, and that's all we're doing. But our energy is ubiquitous and is absorbed, you know, by these kids. So not just absorbed by the kids, absorbed by the parents. So change the game, right?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Sure.
It's always fun.
And as a coach, if we can get 100% out of each individual on that team, the scoreboard always seems to take care of itself.
It does.
You know,
Sure.
if the kids are gelling
Sure,
and
it
playing
does.
together and trying their hardest, success is inevitable in that
Very
respect,
true.
you know?
Lacrosse is undoubtedly a running sport. How do we incorporate running into practice without kind of being lazy about just throwing sprints at the end of a practice?
Sure.
How do we incorporate that in there?
I think for me, the way I approach practice is it's drill, 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 drill. And we are getting repetitions on repetitions. And the kids in their mind are like, oh, this is great. We're just playing a ton of lacrosse. Where realistically, they're also getting much fitter, right? And becoming
Right.
game ready.
Right.
And we know very well there are work drills, right? There are drills
Sure.
where you're working really hard and of course the kids feel it, right? And that's good, right? Because in the game you're going to get to those uncomfortable circumstances where you've gone up and down twice, and I can't sub you off, but this is now where you are, right? You are adapting to a change in that environment. Oh, and we love that, right? That's where they're growing their physical, their physical fitness, even at a young age, right?
Yes.
We're seeing them grow and expand.
Coaches, what are the characteristics of a very successful practice? Ones that you planned it out, and then afterwards you walk away saying, we got a lot of work done tonight in 90 minutes or whatever it is. So what are some of those things that happen where you say, well worth it?
I would just say, like, you've been through it before. When the kids say, "What, practice is over?"
That's a good way to
No,
put
I don't
it,
want it to be over. The dream. I mean, the drills are never seamless, but we had a plan. We went from one to the other. We had good water breaks. Maybe we brought them in once or twice to say, these are things we're focusing on as a team or what have you. And then that game part at the end is just, they lose themselves in that, the scrimmage, whatever those scrimmages are, whether it be by ability, maybe I have all my kids who can pass and catch left to right, or mixed ability, but after that, what happened? Can't we keep practicing? So it's something to do, it's two things. It's structured, but it organically goes, and at the end they're all fired up and high-fiving each other.
I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, a great practice to me is starting out on the right note, right? So bringing the energy starts with us, right? Bringing the energy starts with us always. So starting out on the right note, positive, productive, and that, right? You start on a good note in practice, it just, breeds that positive momentum of, hey, this next drill, we've got full effort. Next drill, full effort. We're getting better. We're growing. We're having fun. The kids are having fun because we're having fun and we are executing the drills we want while we're having fun. I mean, it is like an explosion of development that is, it's kind of, the most fun thing to see as a coach, right?
Yeah.
And on the flip side, what are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things that we can do, the errors that could create a bad practice and something that can stick with our kids that will translate to games?
Yeah, well, the first one we certainly touched on, and that's a coach that comes in with low energy, a coach that comes in with no organization, and the kids smell it on you, so they just, they lack energy, they lack organization as well, they don't try, and you really have to do something as their leader, as their coach, to turn it around. And there are different things we can try. Do you have, what are some of the things that
I would just say, I mean, I'm a teacher. Or we all have jobs, and you have these dads who show up or moms that are helping. They're tired.
Yep.
And Coach, I love your point. You got to come prepared. But guess what? You're human. You're a coach. You're tired. So a lot of nights I might show up and say, Coach, could you take the beginning? Take this. Have your assistant. Hey, take this, man. I'm tired. Or wait a minute, I'm so tired to teach right now. Let's start with a scrimmage today. Shift it up.
Change it up, sure.
Change it up. Get that, put the energy onto them. There'll be nights when you're fired up really, those nights when you're like, I'm ready, my plan is great. And then there'll be other nights you're like, wow, I need coffee at 7 o'clock. And that might be the assistant coach, hey, could you start it? Or let's just start with a game. Get them going until, and that gives us space as a coach to be like, and we can stand on the side and say, hey, what direction we want to go. And that's the same as if the kids are having a bad night. We've been there. You show up, you're all fired up. We're going to play Johns Hopkins with these 7-year-olds. We're fired up, right? And then all of a sudden you got Billy's pushing Johnny, and this guy forgot his helmet, and he's got one cleat, and you're like, oh boy. So you hit the curveball a little bit and try to, just try to, make it fun. Let's just engage, but being flexible, right?
Yep.
Right.
Being flexible. And maybe changing it up, and again, you have a group of people there who are going to support you as a coach.
So coaches, collectively, we have decades worth of experience at the youth level, at least alone. What advice do you have for our first year coach, someone coming into this for the first time, with or without experience, but working with these kids for the first time? As sort of a final thought on this subject, what do we have for them?
I think, to start with, they need to realize that they're not alone, right? This is a big community. Lacrosse community at large is enormous, but it's broken down into regions, and Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse Organization, of course, does a great job organizing and giving us the opportunity to share ideas and giving us platforms for that. They have monthly meetings where you can talk with other coaches and get the support that you need as a new coach. So that's the beginning. You know, I think many of the coaches are going to have the same types of questions. So it's important that they get in a situation where they can share those kinds of ideas and grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a new coach, I mean, you've already made that first decision, so we appreciate you, right? You know, getting involved at the at a grassroots level. If you've played, if you haven't played, great, right? Any way to get involved is the best way to get involved. And I think first and foremost, leveraging what's directly available to you online, right, through our videos here, with the MBYLL online, but also right through the clinic that you'll attend as a coach, right? I think being able to approach that with the mindset of, okay, what can I get out of this? Not just for my knowledge, but to bring to that specific level that I'm going to coach. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing, right, is thinking internally, thinking about those who you can network with inside of that coaching community you have within your town, right, and building rapport there. Because again, you're not going in alone. You shouldn't have to be developing a practice plan on your own. We're all doing other things too, and we want to prioritize this. But don't do it on your own. And you've got directors who have typically been in it longer in that town and have been developing lacrosse within the town. And even outside of that, there's further resources online, high school programs, other people in your community who've played lacrosse, and across the entire Mass Bay community who can be resources and would love to have a conversation just about lacrosse and how we think about it and what we could do to help you.
So I think you all kind of alluded to it, is that Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse League is a network, or a network of coaches, and so the three of you represent thousands of incredible coaches. I want to thank each of you for your contributions to this and wish you all great seasons. And I hope that our coaches get a ton out of this.